Hey guys, it is Aoife from Fred We Say Died Laughing, and I'm here for my 3rd January weekly wrap up. I had a really good reading week. I read 4 books in total. 5 books. I've read 5 books in total. And yeah, I'm really happy with how I got on. The first book I read this week was Hereabhorrent by Andy Livingstone. This is a book I got from NetGalley, and it is a fantasy book, and it was very good. I really enjoyed it. It is about a boy called Bran whose family are killed when his village is attacked, and he ends up as a rower on this slave ship, or it's kind of like a merchant / slave ship. And all these things start to happen to Bran. He kind of gets involved in all these events, and he kind of proves to everyone that he is someone that they want around in a tricky situation. He's he's described as a very small boy. He's only about, I think he must only be about 13 possibly. I can't remember if his age was actually mentioned, but he's pretty young, but he's not someone that people would look at and think is, you know, a very fearsome person, but he ends up just being a really great person you'd want in a tricky situation. He's very clever, and he has really natural talent when it comes to fighting and being able to defend himself. I did really enjoy this. The world building was slow, but the way we got the information was when someone was telling Bran something else. So it wasn't really Bran telling the reader, it was other characters telling Bran, and so the reader found out about this world, because he lived in a very small village and he didn't know too much about the actual world he was living in as just a village boy. He was a miller's son, so he didn't really know too much in terms of geography of the world. There were some really interesting characters in this book. The captain of the ship, you shouldn't really like him because he's the captain of a slave ship, even though it is stressed that was kind of beyond his circumstances that he became this captain. So it's not something that he would want to do, it's not something he agrees on, which is slaving, but it's kind of something he was almost forced into, and he had to keep it up because he needs the money. While I don't really agree with that forced into circumstance of taking people away from their home and selling them into probably terrible lives, I did actually quite enjoy this character. I did like him. He wasn't an anti-hero, but he wasn't a hero either. He was like this kind of in-between mix. The only problem is I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I just thought it got a little bit dragged out of parts. There was one rescue storyline that just seemed to go on forever. I was starting to get bored of it. There's very few female characters in this book. There was only about 2 female characters altogether, I think, and they're not even particularly big roles. They're not main characters, so I would really like if there were some more female characters in the next book. But overall, 4 out of 5 stars. I did enjoy it. It was a pretty good fantasy book, and I'm looking forward to the next one. And the next book I read was a reread of a favourite, and that was The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This was my first book I read for the Ribsat readathon, which is happening until Tuesday, so I still have another 2 days to go with that. But this was my first book I read for this, and it was just an absolute pleasure to be able to read this again. It's been about 5 or 6 years since I read this, so I had forgotten certain parts of it. I've watched the movie twice since the first time I read the book, and the first time I watched the movie I thought it was okay, and then the second time I watched the movie it just hit me in the heart, and I was sobbing like a baby. So it really made me want to read the book again, and I finally got to read it again, and I just loved being able to come back into it with kind of a more fresh mind and appreciate the words so much more than the first time, and appreciate how the words are put together and how they flow and the tone of the book, and I just thought it was fantastic. And if you don't know what this book is about, it is about a girl called Liesl who is adopted by a German couple. She is German, but she's adopted by an older German couple just before the start of World War II, and the whole story is told by Death, who has been watching Liesl, and he is just really interested in her, and he ends up finding out her story. So the book has kind of this weird disjointedness to it because it's been told by Death, it's not been told by Liesl herself. And I found it really interesting because Death is a complete spoiler horror. He loves to tell you who is going to die before they actually die, so you actually do know some of the bad things that are going to happen, because Death kind of warns you before the start of a certain number of certain number of chapters. He'll say, well, he only had 2 months to live, and maybe if this had happened he wouldn't have died like certain time later. So you're like, okay, well, this character is going to die now, yet I still have to read them and I still have to fall in love with their character even though I know they're going to die. And it almost makes it so bittersweet to read because you know these characters don't really have happy endings, yet you still are like almost hoping that something will change at the end of the book even though death has told you it doesn't. So it was just so amazing. It was a really, really great read. There's so many beautiful quotes in this book. I was literally just like liking quotes on Goodreads. Just the way the descriptions are, the prose is just phenomenal. I just really, really love this book. It just sucked me in, and there were definitely some tears by the time I was finished it, and I was at the train station and my eyes were like full of tears and I couldn't sob properly because I was at the train station and it kind of had like pulled me a little bit out of the book because I had to get off the train, and then I was trying to get back into it, but I could feel myself still getting upset about the book. But I just love it. I really, really love it. If people haven't read this book, please give it a chance. I would say give it a good few hundred pages, at least 100 pages to get into it, because the tone of the book and the writing style is a little bit differently because it's just been told a different way than normal books. So I would definitely tell people to give it at least 100 pages before it starts really sinking into you. But 5 out of 5 stars. This book is amazing and I absolutely adore it. The next book I read is something I've been wanting to read for the last few months, and it is Brooklyn by Colm Tóibín. This is, obviously people probably recognise the cover of this book, and it is a movie, and it's an Oscar nominated movie at the moment, and it is about an Irish girl called, it's pronounced either Eilish or Ailish. I was reading it Eilish, but in the movie they say Ailish, so that's obviously how the author probably wants it to be pronounced. A girl called Ailish who lives in Wexford in Ireland, and she goes to America. It's 1950s, early 1950s, and she moves to America for a better life, and she ends up getting really, really homesick, and she is not enjoying her life in America at all, and then she ends up falling in love, but then just as she starts to settle into her life in America, something really bad happens and she ends up having to go home, and she's kind of torn between staying at home and going back to America, and kind of this real turmoil of having the chance at two very different lives, and she has to decide which one is going to be for her, and either way she's going to hurt people that she loves, whichever choice she, whatever one she chooses. So it was a really, really interesting read. It's a very Irish read, and I'm not sure if the tone of it would suit everyone. I thought there was a very lyrical tone to this book. I don't know what it was, just the way the words flowed one after another. I really, really enjoyed it. It was very almost lulling and soothing the way this story is told. It's very much character driven rather than action driven. There's not much action in it. It's just a girl basically talking about her life. Nothing amazing is happening in it, just working in a shop, living in a border house with a few other Irish girls, and then going to a dance and meeting a boy and falling in love with this boy. But I just really felt for her. I don't know whether it was just the whole idea of, obviously 1950s Ireland, there was very, very little for a lot of the younger people to do. There were no jobs, there was no prospects. I do think that what Ailish is going through is still very relevant with today, because I don't think there's a lot of people that I know that don't know someone who has either moved abroad to America or to Australia or to Canada just for a better life and for job prospects and stuff like that. So it's still happening in Ireland today. And I don't know, the love triangle in this book I wouldn't actually describe as a normal love triangle. It's very much a love triangle of two different worlds, and it's just kind of, there's just so many different things that could happen either way, and she's no idea. And with the big thing in Ireland is that she can stay and be with her family, and if she is to go home to America, she's going to be on her own. It's just so heartbreaking that she has to make that choice. With love triangles, I normally have a favourite and I normally don't like the other person at all, where with this one I was really conflicted myself about who I wanted her to choose and what life I wanted her to choose, because I wanted her to kind of have both of them at the same time, and I found it really, really hard to decide who I wanted her to be with. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars just because I think at the end of the book I would have liked a little bit more, I think. I think I would have liked an epilogue about her choice and about maybe a few years on from her choice that she made, whether she was still happy with it and what she thought about it, and, you know, just maybe looking back and seeing what she could have done differently, or, you know, what she wouldn't change. And yeah, like I just kind of missed that. I would have liked just that little bit more, just a page or two more about the repercussions of her decision and how she felt about it. I think the movie gave me that little bit that I missed the end of the book, so I really enjoyed that the end of the movie had that little bit of her decision, and, you know, you see a little bit of, you know, her feelings about the decision that she makes. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars just because I just missed out on that, but overall I really enjoyed the book. The next book I read, I managed to read pretty much in one sitting, and it was Me Before You by JoJo Moyes. I am currently reading After You by JoJo Moyes, but I wanted to read this before I read After You because it's been about 2 years since I read this, so I really wanted to reread it, and I'm so glad I did. There were so many little bits that I'd forgotten that happened in this book, and with the movie coming out at the end of the year as well, or the middle of the year, summer I think it's coming out, I really wanted to, you know, remind myself of the story, and I just absolutely loved it. This book is just one of those books that just like grabs your heart and like twists it and just doesn't let it go, and it was just fantastic. And again, all those emotions went through me. And again, if someone doesn't know, I keep forgetting to explain the books for some reason in this video. And this is about a girl called Lou who ends up becoming a carer for a quadriplegic man called Will, and they kind of teach each other how to enjoy life again. She is kind of showing him that there's stuff he can do that, you know, can give him back some kind of quality of life, and he can enjoy things that he didn't realize he could probably enjoy before. And then he's kind of showing her that there's more to life than just staying in this small little town and being with her family, and, you know, she has opportunity to go and travel and study and do things with her life as well, and not to waste her life. And it's just amazing, and it's just a beautiful story. I would highly recommend this to anyone who likes a good story. 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. And then I finished a collection of essays, which was The Girl Who Was on Fire by a number of YA authors. This is just a collection of essays on the Hunger Games. For some reason, I got this off NetGalley, but it's quite an old book, and for some reason it came up on NetGalley and I requested it and I got a copy. And it's something I'd wanted to read for a while. But when I first saw this, I think on Goodreads or Amazon, I thought it was like a collection of fan fiction written by other YA authors about the Hunger Games, and I was like, yes, I want to read this. But it's not. It's actually a collection of essays about different themes and stuff, and, you know, kind of discussions about the Hunger Games. Which was really good as well, though I would have loved a little bit of fan fiction as well. But yeah, it was pretty interesting to see other people who have written YA books themselves looking back into the Hunger Games and maybe kind of really discussing things that I had maybe picked up on but hadn't really given a whole lot of thought, or other things like kind of how love is used as a political weapon, the realities of the kind of the genetic engineering we see in the Hunger Games, how there are levels of that in the real world today. There was a bit about Gale, about how whether he was, you know, a knight and a cowboy, and his relationship with Katniss and how that kind of went about. And if you haven't read the whole trilogy, don't read this because they do discuss everything that happens, the deaths that happen, you know, who Katniss ends up with, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, but it was pretty good. There were some that kind of mirrored each other and it got a little bit boring after a while, so I gave it 3.5 stars instead of 4 stars, but overall I did quite enjoy it, and it was just kind of an interesting read, a kind of different read than what I normally read, so it was pretty interesting, and 3 out of 5 stars. And that is all I read this week. I hope you guys had a really good reading week, and please let me know what you've been reading below, and I will see you guys again next time. So bye!